Dear grade 11 students, online students, how are you doing? Today's lesson is Grammar, chapter 20, Misplaced and Dangling Modifiers. As you know, any modifier should be as close as possible to the noun it modifies. As a general rule, here a modifier should be placed as close as possible to the word it modifies. If a modifier is misplaced or put in the wrong place or left dangling without a word to modify in a sentence, it will seem to modify the wrong word or no word at all. This section will examine both these sentence errors and show you how to correct them. First, misplaced modifiers. When a modifier is placed too far from the word it should modify, the meaning of the sentence can become unclear. Here, a misplaced modifier seems to modify the wrong word in the sentence. Any phrase or clause that acts as an adjective or adverb can unintentionally be misplaced in a sentence. Look at this example. George Washington borrowed money to attend his first inauguration deep in debt. Deep in debt, this is a phrase, deep in debt. It modifies George Washington. But here it's put very far away from George Washington, which makes us understand that it modified the word inauguration. An inauguration, you know, when a new president becomes president formally or officially, this is the inauguration. Joe Biden will be inaugurated on January 20th as President of the United States of America. The first inaugural ball, another example, where the phrase or clause is misplaced, was held in the New York State Assembly, attended by many foreign ministers. Here in the first example, the misplaced prepositional phrase seems to modify inauguration rather than George Washington, as if the inauguration itself is in debt, and this is not logical. In the second example, the misplaced participial phrase, attended by many foreign ministers, seems to modify New York State Assembly rather than ball. A ball is a party where people can drink, eat, and dance. To correct such sentence errors, simply move the phrase or clause that is misplaced closer to the word that it should logically modify. Some additional rewording may be necessary. Corrected sentences: deep in debt, this is the first example, deep in debt, George Washington borrowed. We understand here that this phrase refers or modifies George Washington, and it's put as close as possible to the word or words it modifies. George Washington borrowed money to attend his first inauguration. The other example, attended by many foreign ministers, the first inaugural ball. Here, what's attended by the foreign ministers is the ball, not the state assembly. Okay, let's have exercise 40. Rewrite the sentences or each sentence correcting the misplaced modifiers. The example says the president receives guests in the Blue Room during state dinners at the White House. The president receives guests in the Blue Room during state dinners at the White House. At the White House is should be part here, or should be put next to the Blue Room, so the answer should be during state dinners. The president receives guests in the Blue Room of the White House. Number one, we'll take number 1 and 2 as an example. The White House is constructed of Virginia sandstone, built in a classical style. Here from this sentence, there is a misplaced phrase, built in a classical style, which, as if it is as it is clear here, maybe modified the word Virginia sandstone. But built in a classical style refers to or modified the White House. So the sentence should be corrected like this: built in a classical style, the White House is constructed of Virginia sandstone. built in a classical style. The White House is constructed of Virginia sandstone. Number 2, numerous trees grow on the White House property of historical interest. Here, of historical interest refers to the trees, right? Not the White House property. So it should be like this. Numerous trees of historical interest grow on the White House property. Numerous trees of historical interest grow on the White House property. Let's move on to the second part of the lesson, dangling modifiers. A dangling modifier seems to modify the wrong word or no word at all, because the word it should modify has been deleted, has been omitted, has been left out from the sentence. Dangling modifier. Shortly after his inauguration, President Kennedy's wife began refurbishing the White House. Here, shortly after the correction, shortly after after President Kennedy's inauguration, his wife began refurbishing the White House. What the difference between the wrong sentence and the corrected sentence? That in the first sentence we didn't mention, in the first phrase, we didn't mention George or President Kennedy himself. Here, shortly after President Kennedy's inauguration, we have his own inauguration, his wife did such and such. But here, shortly after his inauguration, whose inauguration, the name is not mentioned. Okay, another example, dangling modifier. While touring the White House, shoes must be worn. While touring the White House. Here we understand that the shoes are touring the White House, and during this they must be worn. It should be corrected this way. While touring the White House, visitors must wear shoes. Number 3, importing French furniture. The White House was decorated. We understand that the White House imports French furniture, and the White House is a building. So it should be corrected this way. Importing French furniture, Thomas Jefferson decorated the White House. Look at exercise 41. Identifying and correcting dangling modifiers. If a sentence is correct, write correct. If a sentence contains a dangling modifier, rewrite it to make it correct. Number 1, while the sailors were rowing George Washington to his inauguration, white was worn. While the sailors were rowing, rowing means sailing him by boat, George Washington to his inauguration, to become president, or officially president, white was worn. So it should be corrected this way. While rowing George Washington to his inauguration, the sailors wore white. Again, while rowing George Washington to his inauguration, the sailors wore white. Here we understand how white was worn, or who wore white. Number 2, on the way to his inauguration, Washington's boat took him up the Hudson River. If you remember the first example we gave, it's the same mistake. On the way to his inauguration, we can correct it this way. On the way to Washington's inauguration, his boat took him up the Hudson River, or on the way to his inauguration, Washington took a boat up the Hudson River. Okay, this is the end of our lesson today. Thank you very much.